Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us today for leveraging the VISTA campus for project training. Before we get started, I want to review a few things about our online classroom so you can get the most out of today's session. There are several ways that you can participate, but as you heard the operator mention, right now we have the phone lines muted so that we can eliminate background noise. But during the presentation, if you have questions, you can ask them at any time by typing them into the Q&A panel. You'll see that at the lower right corner of your screen, just to the right of the slides. If you have an idea to share or a comment or have a response to a question that's been posed, you can type it into the chat panel. Be sure to chat to all participants so that everyone will be able to see your contributions. We will be monitoring questions that come into the Q&A panel throughout the session, and we'll try to work those in to a couple of breaks during the presentation, but if not, we will queue them up for the formal question and answer session in today's presentation. We ask that you not post questions for the presenters in the chat panel because we might miss them. They might get lost amid all the other conversation. So we really do ask that you use the Q&A panel on the very bottom right of the screen. We'll be talking about some resources today, and we'll make those available along with the recording of today's session on the Supervisors webinar page on the VISTA campus. So if you want to refer back to it or refer some of your colleagues to it, you can direct them there. And with that, we're going to begin our session in just a moment. Hello, everyone. I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Leveraging the VISTA Campus for Project Training. My name is Andy King. I'm a training specialist with the VISTA program at the Corporation for National and Community Service in Washington, D.C., and I'll be your host for today's session. I'd like to introduce the rest of our team. We'll be hearing from Scott Weinrobe and Amy Kanata. Both of them are our partners at Education Northwest in Portland, Oregon. Scott Weinrobe is the e-learning manager for Education Northwest, and Scott led the development and oversees the ongoing maintenance of the VISTA campus. So he and his team have also developed a number of other AmeriCorps VISTA web resources and online training products that help both VISTA members, supervisors, leaders, and alumni with various learning topics. Amy Kanata is a senior advisor at Education Northwest, and she's been working as part of the VISTA Supervisor curriculum team for the past 3 years. So if you've been to supervisor orientation, you may have experienced some of Amy's contributions in designing new aspects of the curriculum there. She's also a key part of the team that developed several new resources to support you in training Subsite supervisors. We're also joined today by my colleague Molly Pelzer, who will be helping to monitor the Q&A so that we can get all of your questions answered when we get to that part of the session. And also want to thank our classroom manager, who's Bethany DeSablon at Education Northwest, managing the technology for us. Now I'm going to turn the session over to Amy, who's going to get us started. Amy?
Thank you, Andy. So here's our list of what we would like to accomplish today. We are going to define blended learning. We're going to, or actually you guys are going to learn how to recommend VISTA campus resources for ongoing member and supervisor training, and also how to locate templates and documents on the VISTA campus to onboard and support Subsite supervisors. So we want to get started today hearing a little bit from you. And first we'd like to hear about your VISTA campus use. So Bethany is going to launch a poll for us, and you'll see that in just 1 second. Okay, so the poll is now open, so take a few minutes to answer those questions about your VISTA campus use. So we're seeing responses roll in. We'll just give it a little bit longer so everyone has a chance to weigh in. And just so you all know, we have about 116 people on this call today, and we have a mix of intermediary supervisors. We also have subsite supervisors, and I believe we have a few VISTA leaders as well. Okay, so let's do about 10 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll. So if you haven't answered questions yet, please do so. Okay, so Bethany just closed the poll, and it'll just take a second before we can see the results. Okay, so on average, it looks like the majority of folks are visiting the VISTA campus about once a month, and some of you are visiting about once a week. Great, glad to see that the majority of you have a VISTA campus login or profile account. And it looks like we have a good number of folks who've downloaded resources or referred to the member handbook. Great, so it sounds like across the board this is a pretty active VISTA campus group, so this is good for us to know. And you'll notice there were some other questions in there. If you haven't already gotten involved with the VISTA campus, you'll know more than you probably wanted to know by the end of this webinar. And so we encourage you to create a login and start using the campus right away. And that really is the big theme for our discussion today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We wanted to give you a little background on the VISTA campus features. As you know, the campus has a variety of resources to support member and sub-site supervisor training, as well as just supervisor resources. Scott Weinrobe is going to give us a tour in just a moment to show us some of the tools to maximize the use of the VISTA campus. But first, let's just talk about, in general, some of the key features. So recent additions to the VISTA campus were based on user feedback. Specifically, we have VISTA supervisors, state office staff, and others that were very instrumental in helping us create new resources and also update some of our old classics. Some of the new features on the site include a learning plan, which Scott will demonstrate in just a few minutes, VISTA badges that people can earn for completing different activities on the campus, a learning connections feature, which also allows you to connect with other site users online, like a social network. And then also, we're very excited to say that the supervisor section has about 20 new templates, presentations, resources, and checklists. And as I mentioned before, we've also updated some of our classic resources, and we've retired a few old, outdated resources as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott to give us a tour. And Bethany's going to go ahead and pass the ball to him, and then what you'll see is Scott is going to go live onto the VISTA campus and give you a little bit of a tour.
Thank you, Amy. Let me just give me one moment and I will share my screen. Okay, and here we go. Hi, everyone. So you should now be seeing the homepage of the campus in WebEx. And one of the enhancements of the campus kind of starts right here on the home page. In general, the campus is really customized depending on the type of user who is visiting the campus, and all of this starts with your user account. So it's good, as it's on the polls, that everybody has accounts. When you come to the campus, you can access many of the resources without logging in, but as a best practice, it really is helpful to go ahead and log in so that you see the latest information announcements that are really customized for you all as supervisors. So to show that, I'm going to log in as a supervisor. Forgive my slow typing. Okay. So here we go. So now I'm logged in as Celia Supervisor, and you'll notice that the homepage to start with reconfigured itself to be customized for me in my supervisor role. The slideshow at the top actually can be customized and certain slides presented based on the type of user who's visiting the campus. The announcements are also customizable to supervisors or VISTAs or the other user types associated with the different campus accounts. You'll see upcoming webinars here, and these are webinars that are pulled from the supervisor webinar area of the campus. You'll also see a couple of the most recent forum posts. Those are any forum posts to which you have access, so that would include posts to the member forums or the Supervisor Cafe forum. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the overall site navigation. We've collected most of the key resources for supervisors right here under a Supervisors menu on the main navigation tab of the campus. You'll have direct links there to things like your Supervisor Manual, the Member Handbook, the Supervisor Cafe Forum, which is a place to chat with other supervisors, and the list of upcoming supervisor webinars. So let me also kind of talk a little bit about some of the enhancements to the search functionality of the campus that we hope you'll find helpful. Let's say, for example, that I am looking for resources on recruitment. I'm going to go ahead and type that into the search. And the campus uses a pretty powerful search faceting system, and what we've done with most of the resources on the campus is that we've tagged them using a taxonomy that's based on different facets. So, for example, the type of resource, you can filter in or out forum topics, pages, job board posts, and so on. We've tagged resources by the user's role, different focus areas. Many of them we've tagged by level of difficulty, purpose, and so on. So this is really a way that you can just kind of drill down and filter to just the type of resource you're looking for. So let me scroll down. So here's one that sounds interesting. I'm going to click on this Marketing for Recruitment resource, and just to give a kind of brief tour of the way that these resource pages are laid out, you'll see at the top that there are a number of different links. These are actually the taxonomy tags that I had mentioned before. So if you click on those, you'll see a list of other resources that are tagged with that same term. Of course, here I would just click on the link to the document itself to open that document. And then at the bottom, you'll see a list of, you might also like, kind of similar to if you were browsing on Amazon. This tries to suggest resources that are similar to the resource you're looking at based on the title or based on kind of being tagged with similar taxonomy terms. Okay. So now I want to kind of briefly highlight one key resource. Amy will be doing a more kind of general tour of the supervisor area, but I did want to make sure to point out that we have the supervisor manual linked right from the main supervisor menu, and this is just recently, in fact, I think as of yesterday or the day before, been updated, and you can find the very latest and greatest information by going to the supervisor manual. This manual and similar resources on the campus, such as the member handbook, also have a number of kind of built-in features that will help you kind of find what you're looking for and use the manual. So for example, this search field here where you can type in and it says search this lesson. If you want to find pages within the manual itself that have a term, you can do that by typing in a search term. And you can also click the printer-friendly version here. If you ever wanted to get a hard copy of the manual, you can either print the entire manual by clicking the printer-friendly version, and it'll bring up a simpler HTML page that removes all of the design elements of the campus so you can print out a clean copy. Or you can also click on an individual section of the manual, scroll down, and that gives you the option either to print out the whole manual or only that one section. So now I wanted to highlight another feature that Amy mentioned, and this is the learning connections. And what the learning connections are is really kind of a pretty powerful new feature of the campus that lets you suggest training to your VISTAs, to other supervisors, any other user on the campus that you're connected with. So the first step is to connect with the person. So I have a new VISTA, and I'm going to go to the Learning Connections tab of my profile, which I got to from clicking on My Account under this main menu at the top of the screen that has my name. So I am looking for Valerie Vista, who's a new VISTA, who's assigned to my project. I type her name and I search, and there she is. So I can click this plus sign to add Valerie as a connection. The way that works is that as soon as I make that request, Valerie will get a notification that I've requested a connection with her. It's similar to Facebook or other kind of social networking platforms. Once she approves, then at that point I'm connected with Valerie, and then I can do a number of different things. I can message her through the campus, and kind of even more importantly, I can suggest training to Valerie that will appear on her learning plan. So the way that I would suggest training once I'm connected with someone is that I would find some training that I'm interested in. So let's say that I'm browsing the campus and I come across in the work section under planning events this cool little video that gives kind of an overview of how to write an effective press release. And I check it out, and I think that that's something that Valerie would find, or that my connection, my VISTAs would find interesting or useful in their work. I could either tag it for myself, and that's a way of bookmarking it, adding it to my learning plan, or I could suggest the resource to one of my connections by clicking this Suggest This Resource button, selecting the person I want to suggest the resource to, and then just finally click this button to suggest the resource to that user. Okay. So now let me log out of as a supervisor and talk a little bit more about some of the features of the learning plan. So I'm now going to log in as Victor Vista, who's one of my connections. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to log in as Valerie Vista, who I just made the connection request to. And what I wanted to point out on Valerie's learning plan is that there are actually a number of resources that are automatically assigned whenever a VISTA or whenever a supervisor creates an account. So in the case of VISTAs, There's one required training, and that's the Starting VISTA page, which then contains a number of links to things like our Terms and Conditions course, our Benefits Hub, a tutorial on civil rights and responsibilities, and a few other resources. So as I'm sure you all know, when VISTAs attend their pre-service orientation, they're required to have completed their Terms and Conditions course. So that's a link from that Starting VISTA page. But the other trainings are considered required as well, even though they aren't specifically checked at PSO. There are also a number of suggested trainings that are assigned to people based on their roles. So, for example, here we have a general kind of video on poverty measurement. We suggest that they check out the VISTA Blend, the Benefits Hub, and a few other resources that we believe will be of general kind of use to VISTAs. And there are a similar set of resources that are automatically suggested to supervisors when they create an account. The suggested learning column is also where any training that you suggested to your connection will appear for that connection, and it'll show your name under suggested by. So now I am going to go ahead and pass the presenter ball back to Bethany.
Thanks, Scott. I think that tour was really helpful for us to see the different ways that we can use the learning connections and how to suggest resources to other people. So let's go ahead and dive in with a few more specifics about how we can train members using the VISTA campus. So I've looked at a couple ideas for strategies, as well as some resources, and encouraging your members to use the VISTA campus by suggesting resources to them via the Suggest This Resource feature that Scott showed you helps populate their learning plan. And it also incorporates online resources you can do this by incorporating online resources as well with your in-person training efforts for what we like to call a blended learning approach. And we'll talk a little more about blended learning in just a minute. And as for the resources, we really recommend that you get acquainted with the resources in the different sections of the VISTA area, so the life and the work areas, as well as just the campus in general, so that you know what to recommend to your members, maybe based on their VAD or based on their professional development needs. And then just so you know which resources you might want to utilize either in your trainings or in a live training session, say, for example, a video. I know that was something many of you were interested in that you told us about in the registration. Also, we offer live and on-demand webinars like this one, and those are offered monthly for members, and you can find those under the Connect and Learn tab. And then we also offer the VISTA Blend online college-level courses, and they're really a wonderful resource for member training. And we'll talk a little more about the courses in just a minute. So just to recap, some of the ways that you can share training with your members is through suggesting things via learning plans, building awareness about the campus with your members, and then doing some blended learning where you use both online and in-person resources. And get acquainted with what's available. So let's take a look at what we mean by blended learning, because it really is a theme for today's session. We've mentioned it a couple times so far, and in the VISTA context, blended learning consists of in-person training and support supplemented with online study that really is about enhancing the members' skills. So the online study might include accessing resources from your favorite sites. You may also use other sites like Foundation Center or local sites. It's not just VISTA Campus, but again, it's online as well as in person and bringing those together for a blended experience. Also, in case you haven't been there for a while, you may also consider exploring the National Service Knowledge Network, which is another resource for National Service members and staff. And then also in the case of the VISTA Blend, perhaps you want to encourage your members, if they're interested, to take an online college course. So another example of a blended learning activity that a VISTA might consider would be to maybe assign a recorded webinar, like the Using Social Media to Recruit Donors and Volunteers webinar, and then coming together and meeting as a group to form a strategy based on what the members learned. So that's just an example of how you may combine a webinar with an in-person strategy session. So let's look at some of the resources that we have, and one I'm really excited about outlines some lesson plans for campus self-study for members. So this resource called Self-Directed Learning, the Self-Directed Learning Guide through the VISTA campus, is a wonderful resource that was developed by a group of leaders through their work on an action learning challenge. And it features self-guided lessons that are organized by topic. Each lesson also has a little recap of key points that the members need to remember about that lesson. And Bethany's going to go ahead and share the URL for this resource. It's also available on the VISTA campus, so if you wanted to find it later, you could just search for it by title. But she went ahead and provided the URL, which if you're interested in downloading it, you can just copy and paste that URL and plug it into a separate browser window, and you can download that today. So again, a great guide that includes lesson plans for self-study, and we listed some of the topics, but there are more topics than just these 4 in this guide. And of course, we'll post a link to this guide along with the recording of the session on the VISTA campus in the next couple days. So another thing that we wanted to do is just feature some strategies from fellow supervisors on how they're using the VISTA campus for training. And so we asked a couple folks about it, and one really, I think, interesting example is how Intertribal Sports blends the VISTA campus resources into their in-person on-site orientation and training, affectionately known as OSOT. So what they do is they refer their VISTA members to the VISTA Member Handbook, and they also use the OSOT checklist. And within that checklist, there's a activity called the Independent Community Investigation Activity. And they use that activity along with the member handbook to help orient their VISTAs, and specifically the independent community investigation activity to help their members get acquainted with the community in which they'll be serving. They also ask the members to use the VISTA map to research other VISTA programs in the region and identify some programs that they would like to go visit and connect with and learn from. So that's another way that they encourage their members to use the campus. They're also asked to watch the VISTA campus tour and then do a little research about webinar offerings and outline some things that they're interested in taking or exploring. And then they also, in a true blended learning approach, encourage them to look at other websites besides the VISTA campus to find resources, assessments, and materials that could be useful to their work that connect with their VAD and their goals. So again, we'll make sure to post this assignment list so that you have this written down with the recording. We want to make sure that these resources are accessible to you and easy to find. But just some ideas to kind of put in your toolkit along with your other training strategies. So just a little another little pitch for the resources for member training. I put some ideas here under the different categories on the VISTA campus. Some of these examples, obviously the categories mirror the VISTA campus sections, and as Scott showed you, if you want to suggest a specific resource, you use that suggest this resource to someone, and those are available on the resource page for each of the listings. And then, as I mentioned before, I know that some of you are specifically interested in videos that can be used for training. So just know that the campus resources include online tutorials, videos, forums, templates, and more. So there really are a variety of different types of resources depending on what you, your supervisors, or your VISTAs might need at any given moment. And I do encourage you to explore the search feature that Scott showed you, and there's ways you can filter it so you could just see the list of videos, or you could just see the list of forums, and that's through the search feature. So get acquainted with what's there, just so you kind of know when you're ready to assign that training to others. And as I mentioned before, I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the VISTA Blend online courses. And again, these were designed specifically for VISTA members. There are 2 courses that are currently offered, Resource Development is a course in which students will learn how to build capacity in their organization through resource development, while also developing skills in the technical aspects of fundraising, grant writing, and special events. And then the second course that we offer is volunteer management, where students learn about planning and implementing recruiting, screening, and training strategies that can be applied at your VISTA site. So these are courses that folks take in addition to their VISTA service. College credit is available, and the next application period starts January 5th. So if you have any members that you think might be interested, have them keep a lookout on the campus for the application information, which they can find under the Connect and Learn tab on the VISTA campus. So I've been talking a lot. We really want to hear from you guys, thinking about everything that you've heard so far and the tour that Scott did. Let's do a little chat activity. And what we want to know is how can you tie in VISTA Campus resources or offerings with your member training and coaching? So based on what you saw, how might you tie in your VISTA Campus with your member training and coaching? And you can just enter your ideas into the chat box. And be sure to send those to all participants so everyone can see your responses. Okay, I'm not seeing any chats coming in, so I'm wondering if our technology might be failing us at this very moment. So I'm sorry about that, folks, if you're not able to send chat messages. Okay,
yeah, and maybe I'll just offer a reminder or a tip for folks. If you don't see the chat window because we had the poll open earlier, so the chat may have collapsed, at the top of your screen towards the right, you'll see a bunch of little icons. The first one is participants. Right next to that is the chat. You'll see the speech bubble. If you click on that, the chat window will open, and you can type into the little field. Make sure where it says send to that it says all participants next to that, and if not, use the little drop down to select all participants. We'd love to hear your ideas about or thoughts about how you might tie the VISTA campus in with your member training.
Thanks, Andy. That seems to work like a charm. We're seeing some ideas roll in here.
And it looks like one other clue, Tracy mentioned that it looks like the only option in the chat is to send it to all panelists. So if you can do that, if you don't see all participants, send it to all panelists. We'll be able to see and we'll read them out as they come in. So there are a few ideas already. Let's see. Angie says you can use the VISTA campus as part of your on-site orientation and training plan. So you could talk about the campus and then actually direct your members there to learn on particular topics. Let's see. Debbie says that she already incorporates information and content that's on the campus into the trainings that she's doing for her VISTAs. And Nathan's suggestion is to set a goal of one session between quarterly performance reviews. make it the VISTA's responsibility to register and then take the training. So that's a great suggestion, Nathan. Thank you for that. And it could be a live webinar. It could be going back to a recorded session that we've already done that's available for viewing on demand. Or it could be one of the other tutorials that Amy talked about earlier that are available on the VISTA campus. So those are a few ideas I've seen. And if my colleagues are seeing any others, feel free to chime in with those. Oh, here's another one. Miriam has suggested that this can be used to support in-person training and or to substitute for in-person training. The campus can also support coaching strategies in the form of follow-up, which is great because if you have a coaching conversation, you can provide a bit of direction or guidance and then point the VISTA member to some specific resources on the campus where they can then do their own follow-up and reinforcement of whatever ideas or skills you are hoping that they can sharpen. So these are all some great suggestions and ideas. I'm not seeing any others coming in right now, so Amy, maybe I'll turn back to you.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, everyone. Some really great, solid, concrete ideas, I think, for how you can tie in the VISTA campus with your member training and coaching. So let's go ahead and shift our focus onto onboarding and supporting Subsite supervisors. And I know that we do have quite a few Subsite supervisors on the call, and this totally applies to you as well. A lot of these resources were designed for intermediaries to support you, but they're resources that really a lot of times the intermediaries would be customizing and maybe passing along to you or using with you during any of your training or support meetings with your intermediaries. So first off, just to kind of show, like we did for the members, some strategies and resources that you might want to use. Again, the learning plan is sort of where a lot of our recommendations happen. Scott mentioned and showed the learning plan to you. We can also suggest content to our Subsite supervisors or others that are on the VISTA campus, but as Scott mentioned, they do have to have an account so that you can connect with them through the Learning Connections feature. So our first two strategies are pretty simple. Create an account and build awareness about the site with your colleagues. So if they don't know already, we encourage you to introduce them to the VISTA campus and suggest that it's a great resource for them as they manage the work at their site. We also encourage you to customize existing templates and resources, and of course use resources as discussion points with your supervisors, and we'll talk about a couple of those that I think can be really great sort of discussion prompts to kick off conversations about who's doing what and the steps that are needed in specific processes that we all do at our site. And just like the member area, we have a really wide variety of resources available for supervisors, which are listed by topic. And this is just a sample list of some of the topics I thought you might be interested in, but there's many, many more, and we'll take a look at a few in detail in just a minute. So when we were asking supervisors how they use the VISTA campus, here are a couple examples that came up. Cornerstone Assistance Network uses the pre-recorded webinar specifically, and there's one that's specifically for Subsite supervisors about their role. So that's one that Cornerstone Assistance Network assigns to their Subsite supervisors just to clarify what it is that they'll be doing as a Subsite supervisor. Especially since most of our Subsite supervisors don't go to in-person training, the campus is really your place to access training resources for your Subsite. And then Feeding Texas submitted some of their ideas. They use information about the VADs and OSOT from the supervisor orientation at their in-person training. So they basically pull down resources that are offered at supervisor orientation and use them in their live training sessions with their Subsite. And the good news is that all of those resources are available under Working with Subsites. You can find the PowerPoint slides from the in-person supervisor orientation as well as the workbook. and some of the other little activities that we do during the session if you want to replicate those with your subsites. Also, you may want to use these resources to train staff members about the VISTA project as well. So again, I'll make sure to post these lists along with the resource URLs with the recording of this session on the VISTA campus so you can kind of see in detail the resources that both Cornerstone Assistance Network and Feeding Texas like to use. So let's go ahead and delve into some specific resources that are new to the VISTA campus that, again, were specifically designed to support sub-site supervisor training. So there are three, and I realize I probably could have put 10 on this slide, but there are three resources that I think you're definitely going to want to remember because I think they're great launching points for sub-site supervisor training. And the first one is the Sub-Site Supervisor Training Syllabus, and this is a great resource to help you guide and plan your sub-site supervisor training. It really lists all of the campus resources by topic that you are going to either want to pass along to your sub-sites or the templates that you want to use to plan your programming, calendars, all kinds of stuff in the Sub-Site Supervisor Syllabus. That's a mouthful. And then there's also something that we're really excited about that came out of requests from the field from other supervisors, is there's a customizable PowerPoint presentation that you can use to provide an overview of the VISTA program. And so this is something, especially for new sub-sites or new supervisors that are coming to VISTA, that you can use to really explain both your project and also the VISTA program in general. So we put together a pretty nice slide deck for you that you can plug in your own photos and information about your project so that you can orient both sub-sites as well as other staff members and maybe even members about your project. And then another resource that's been, I guess, on the campus for about a year or so now and was recently updated is the VISTA Sponsor and Sub-Site Supervisor Major Tasks at a Glance. So basically what this is it's a task list where you can sit down and talk with your sub-site supervisors about who's doing what. Here's all the things that we need to take care of. Is that something I'm going to do as the intermediary, or is that something my sub-site supervisor is going to do? And it's a Word document that you can customize so that you can really figure out who's doing what. And you can see all the major tasks in one place. So these are just three resources I think can be really helpful. Bethany, maybe when you get a chance, if you could share the syllabus link with folks in the chat panel. Oh, she's way ahead of me. Looks like she already did it. So you can download the syllabus. It's also available under Working with Subsites in the supervisor area. So I want to take a couple of minutes to just show you a few of the other new resources that I think could be helpful for onboarding and training your subsites. So I'm going to have Bethany pass the ball, and we're going to do a quick tour of the VISTA Campus Supervisor section. So just give us 1 minute for our technology to sync up. Okay, so Scott's driving for me, so thank you, Scott.
No problem.
As I mentioned, one of our main objectives last year was to develop VISTA Campus resources for intermediaries to use to train their sub-site supervisors. So we're going to focus on some of those resources right now. And again, the list of suggested resources for training subsites is available in that syllabus document that we shared with you. So the main section is under Supervisors Working with Subsites. That's where we want to sort of start. And each of the supervisor pages provide a little bit of overview about that topic area, which is a little different than what we have on the member side. There's a little more direction at the top of the SUPS pages. And this is where you can find the syllabus, as well as there's a new site sample agenda. If you need to orient a new subsite, there's an agenda that you can build on. And again, we tried to make sure these were in Word or a format that you can edit and make your own. As I mentioned, there's also the PowerPoint presentations from the in-person supervisor training that you can use to train others. and then also the major tasks at a glance document. So this is all under working with Subsite. And now I want to take a look at the recruitment section. And I think the recruitment section is the one that we worked on the most last year. And I want to just do a special shout out to the VISTA leader group that created a wonderful suite of recruitment resources that we were able to adapt for use for Subsite as well as intermediary organizations. So thanks, leaders, for that Action Learning Challenge project. 8 of the 20 new resources that were added to the supervisor section this past year are in the recruitment area. We know that recruitment is a big job and an important job, and so we really wanted to provide more resources for you as well as your Subsite. So again, this section has subsections, which is also a little bit unique. And so if you go to, for example, recruitment planning, you'll see that the recruitment planning section actually has quite a few resources listed. And just a few things about the recruitment planning section that I think could be helpful for you when you're working with your Subsite. There's a recruitment checklist template, and this is, again, something that our wonderful leaders developed. And you can use that to make sure that you do everything in the recruitment cycle. There's also a reading about recruitment team training and process enhancement, and this really helps you look at your current recruitment process, work with your Subsites, and sort of define what you're doing. It also has some prompts for you to divide up the tasks between you and your intermediaries and gives you just some examples of how other programs around the country have done recruitment when they have a multi-site project. There's some information about building a diverse team. That's a little multimedia element that you can watch. And then also a piece that we are really excited about as well. It's a customizable Excel document that's a VISTA member recruitment calendar. So again, the leaders developed this, and what you do is you can type in your PSO dates, and it populates the Excel document with all your key deadlines for recruitment. So the VISTA member recruitment calendar, again, I think is a really useful tool. And what some of the sites have done with this is they have put it online as a Google Doc, and then they've shared that document or put it on a shared drive so that they can all sort of see where the different members are within the recruitment process. So another section of the recruitment area is the recruitment screening area, and I'm just going to mention these briefly. That gives you all the steps that are required for screening VISTA applicants, whether you're doing that or your Subsites are doing that. It gives you everything that you need to know. Under the recruiting interviewing section, there's sample interview questions as well as information about different interviewing techniques. We know that there's certain questions that yield better results than others, and you can find those under the interviewing section. And then once you interview, there's the selecting the VISTA members themselves, and there's some tips and resources that you can use with your Subsites to help them choose the best qualified candidates, as well as completing all those steps that are required to officially bring someone on board to VISTA. And what we really like about this selecting area is there are also some resources and ideas for Subsites to help keep candidates engaged between the time that they're selected and when they go to PSO and arrive on site. And just another section I just want to briefly mention is the two sections, actually. There's an orientation section, and there's also a coaching and supporting section. And orientation is where you find all your information about OSOT. There's a new OSOT guidebook that was developed by a different team of leaders through an Action Learning Challenge that we think is really great to get some new ideas to spice up your in-person training. And there's also a PowerPoint. Again, it's a customizable PowerPoint that you can use to train your Subsites about coaching and supervision within the VISTA project. So that might be a PowerPoint that you could pull down, customize, and maybe have a webinar like this one, or send out via an email and follow up with a conference call with your Subsite around coaching and supporting VISTA members. And then finally, the last section I want to mention, because I know everybody loves reporting and evaluation. It's something we all have to do. This area includes information about performance measures, as well as a link to the new VISTA app, which allows members to use an online app to track their service activities. And it also includes another customizable Excel document that is a reporting calendar. So you can sort of type in your start date, and you can track where you're at with your reporting, as well as things you need to do with members, like mid-year reviews and things like that. And then just a little mention of e-grants, which is also part of the reporting and evaluation section. We're really excited that this year we're going to be able to create some new resources to support all of you around e-grants. And so what we'd love to do is, since we have about 120 supervisors on the call today, we'd like to do a quick poll to see what you might need around support for e-grants. And so this is kind of like live information sharing for us to help us learn what you need as far as help with e-grants. So Bethany just launched a poll, and I'll give you a couple minutes to complete that. Go ahead and complete the poll. What kind of help do you need with e-grants? Or maybe what kind of resources would be helpful for you? And I know some of you may have figured out e-grants by now, so think back to when you were a new supervisor and the kind of help that you might have needed. Just a couple more minutes to enter your thoughts about the type of help you might need with e-grants. And just so you all know, I'll be passing this information on to the supervisor curriculum team, who will be developing these resources this year. And Bethany's just going to leave that poll open so you can complete that at your leisure, and we'll close it in a little while. But we're going to go ahead and move on so that we make sure that we have time for questions. So again, I hope that you learned some things about how you use the supervisor area as well as the member area and the new features of the VISTA Campus for Training. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Andy, and we're going to do a question and answer session. So there's a couple ways, as we mentioned, to ask a question. You can use the Q&A panel that's located in the bottom right-hand corner, and you may need to click on the little arrow to post a question. You can also queue up your question through the operator. Operator, can you give us some instructions on how to do that?
Absolutely. To ask a question from the phone lines, you will press *1. You will be prompted to unmute your phone and record your name. Again, it's *1 to ask a question.
Great. And while we're waiting for questions to come in over the phone, we have a few that have already come in through WebEx. So Ingrid has a question. And Scott, this is something that you had talked about when you were looking at the campus. Ingrid says, when you add to the learning plan, that training is added to favorite content, or and then after completing the training, it still stays there. She asks, is there a way to track trainings completed, making it less crowded? She suggested using My Journal for her team members, but wondered if there was another way that they could more easily track which campus resources or courses they've completed.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Ingrid, for the question. Currently, there's not a way to mark training as completed. That is something that's on our kind of longer-term enhancement list for the learning plan. It got a little bit complicated because there's such a variety of different trainings, including just documents as well as courses which are tracked, videos, and so on. So technically, we don't currently have a way to do that, but that is on our kind of long-term enhancement research list.
Great, thanks, Scott. Our next question comes from Ricky, and she says, how much training on the VISTA campus do new VISTA members get when they're at PSO? And I can talk a little bit about that. So we, before VISTAs even come to PSO, you're probably aware that we communicate with them by email, and we give them a short course of study, a course of probably about 5 or 6 online tutorials that we ask them to complete before they even arrive at PSO. So that's sort of their first introduction to the VISTA campus. And then throughout, in the small group sessions when they're looking at topics around poverty or community entry, volunteer mobilization, fundraising, all of the topics, there's a segment in each of those sessions where we review with them some of the resources that are available on the VISTA campus. So it's not long, it's not a lot, but we do point them, sort of within the context of each of those courses to the resources that supplement that are on the campus. In addition, we, whoever is there at the PSO from the VISTA headquarters will lead a session called Navigating Your Year of Service. And there again, we do talk about the VISTA campus, and we talk about some of these features. So we try to highlight them in a number of ways, but it's a lot, there is a lot of information that's shared at PSO, and we know that not everybody's going to be able to absorb all of it. Operator, do we have any questions lined up on the phone?
We only have one at this time, and it's actually coming from Ricky Willie. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Ricky. Actually, you just answered one of the questions that I had. And then another question I had was about the badge system. You mentioned that at the beginning. I'm just wondering how that works a little bit and what the benefits might be for VISTA members to earn badges. And can I see that as a supervisor?
So, Scott, do you want to take that question about VISTA badges?
Sure, Andy. Thanks, Ricky. That's a really good question. So there are a variety of different badges. When you can access them through your account. Currently, as a supervisor, it's not something that is available to check on for your VISTAs. Although I believe if you look at if you click on one of your actually I take it back. If you click on one of your connections, you should see any badges they've earned. I wouldn't look at them as kind of hard indicators of training completed. The badges are more about kind of encouraging the use of the campus. So it's you get a badge when you create an account. You get badges for putting your PIN in the map. You get badges based on the number of lessons you complete. So it's really kind of a little reward system designed to encourage ongoing use of the campus. And it's something that, again, with the new campus having, or refreshed campus having launched just, less than a year ago, it's one of the areas we look to for continued enhancements going forward.
Great. Thank you, Scott. We have a question from Jeff that came in through WebEx, and he says, has the 2015 PSO schedule been published, and if so, is it available on the VISTA campus? So two-part question, two-part answer. The answer, yes, it is published. To get the dates for your project to place VISTAs, you'll check with your state office. So we don't publish the whole calendar on the campus because it could lead to confusion. We want to make sure that you're getting your specific dates because not every project can place at every single PSO. So check with your state office about your next PSO dates. And we are getting close to the top of the hour. We have opened an evaluation poll, which you now see on the right side of your screen. So if you would take a minute or so to give us your thoughts about today's session, and if you have suggestions for how we can improve or what you'd like to see in the future, we would love to get your input there. And then while you're doing that, I want to just give you a little heads up about what's coming down the road. Next month, looking ahead to January, we will have a webinar on the elements of an effective recruitment plan. So if recruitment is on your to-do list for the new year, you will want to join us on January 20th, same time, and we'll be sending out another invitation email with the details so you can register for that. Again, we appreciate your participation today. Thank you for all that you're doing to support the VISTA program, and particularly your VISTA members, and we want to wish you all very happy and safe holidays. Thank you for joining us.